Been away for some time. It's Idiot Wind, blundering through Dylan Vinyl, the definitive collection. I think Sid's looking a bit wearied by this week's selection, which is an album called Infidels. Before we get to Infidels, a bit of Bob news. Been a bit of Bob news since I last saw you. He's published a book, The Philosophy of Modern Song, which I've just started reading, and is fascinating and funny so far. I've also seen Bob twice for the 14th and 15th times. I saw him at London Palladium on October the 23rd and Nottingham Motorpoint Arena on October the 28th. Best 2 times ever seen him. He was on form, and on Nottingham he did an encore for the only time in his entire Rough and Rowdy Ways tour to commemorate the death of Jerry Lee Lewis, which was announced earlier in the day. Right. On to Infidels. This is a strange album. It's an album haunted by the ghost of the album that could have been. This could have been a very good album indeed, possibly a classic album, but Bob took over the selection of songs at the last minute and ruined it for everyone and for all eternity. He hired Mark Knopfler after asking Frank Zappa, David Bowie and Elvis Costello allegedly to produce this album. Mark Knopfler and his engineer, Neil Dorfsman, were doing a great job. The studio tape showed them being very encouraging and Bob responding to that. The musicians were the same on every track. Robbie Shakespeare and Sly Dunbar were the rhythm section. Mark Knopfler himself and Mick Taylor of the Rolling Stones, and later the Rolling Stones, on guitars. And Alan Clark from Dire Straits on keyboards, along with Bob, of course. He played a bit of keyboard on it as well. The main problem was Bob's choice of material. Can you still see me, Sid?
I can.
I can't see you. Right. Well, Bob had bought a boat at this
Hang on. Stop.
It's
Stop. So just put the book down, like out of shot. And go again.
Sorry.
Like just before the fall. We'll edit this bit out.
Okay. Fair enough. The main fault is the choice of songs, as I said. Bob had bought a boat, which you can see in here. It's called the Water Pearl. And he had a crew, and he liked sailing around the Caribbean in this boat. He liked learning how to sail a boat, but what he really liked was not being near a phone in those days and being able to sit in his cabin writing song after song. He wrote 16 songs on that boat, and he brought them all to the recording sessions for Infidels, which were at New York's Power Station Studios. The recordings are digital, but they're mainly recordings of live performances. He often sang while they were playing. He occasionally used the digital technology to move things around a bit on a track like Joker Man, and drop in a odd bit of changed lyric, which was a thing he did all the time. Well, let's discuss the songs on the album, because there's the famous song Blind Willie McTell, one of the best songs Bob has ever written, inexplicably left off, even though it was the first song they started recording on day one. And they did loads of versions of it, versions with Bob on the piano and Mark Knopfler on acoustic guitar, as featured on the first volume of the bootleg series, volumes 1 to 3, released 8 years later. And there were several band versions, acoustic led and electric led. Some of that stuff can be heard on Springtime in New York, the box set released last year. It's a great song. It's about American history. It's about suppression of Black creativity while exploiting it. It's a song about slavery. Michael Gray, the great Dylan critic, says it's a song about death. It's based on the melody of the blues song St. James Infirmary, which is referred to directly in the lyric. And it's an epic of beautiful poetic simplicity. He's performed it many times on stage. The fact it's not on the album is a crime. There's a song called Foot of Pride, made famous by Lou Reed's performance at the Bob Dylan 30th anniversary celebration at Madison Square Garden in New York in the 90s. Never released as part of this album, never released as part of any Bob album. Those are the two best songs written for this period, and they're both absent. There's several other very nice songs. Tell Me is a lovely little love song. Lord Protect My Child is it's a father's song. It's literally it's like a more grown up, forever young situation. Julius and Ethel is a terrible protest song about the Rosenberg case when he gets all the facts wrong as usual. But you know, there's a whole array of songs that would have made this album more considerable to listen to, I think. And when you're faced with this record, you're faced with, I think the opening track, Joker Man, is one of his best songs for years. Its lyrical approach is completely opposite to that of the gospel albums we've just been through. It's not simplistic in any way. It's very, very obfuscatory and poetic. It's about a strange figure who's been preaching the word of the Lord but isn't to be trusted. It's, again, Bob looking at himself and saying, don't trust me. And it's a very, very interesting lyric indeed. Sweetheart Like You is a lovely little love song, if it is a love song, because there is a kind of religious subtext to it, with an appallingly sexist verse. Neighborhood Bully, it's a blatantly boneheaded, one-sided view of a very multifaceted problem. If the problems in the Middle East were as simple as neighborhood bully, the neighborhood bully being the very victimized, in Bob's eyes, state of Israel, then these problems would have been solved decades ago. But the fact is they're complicated, so they haven't been. And this song is a simplistic song. It's unworthy of him. License to Kill, despite a terrible line about man has invented his doom, first step was touching the moon, which is just dumb as shit, is a lovely song, taking the woman's side about a male world addicted to violence. And without that line, I'd love it. Man of Peace is a good song, although it would fit straight into any of the gospel albums. I first heard Man of Peace sung by a very well-known blues outfit called the Holmes Brothers in a pub in Nottingham. They just went into it, and it worked brilliantly with their voices. Van Morrison loves the Holmes Brothers, and they were great that night. Man of Peace was very memorable. Union Sundown, a good rocker. It's mainly about globalization and corporate capitalism. Some people think it's anti-union, but the union the sun is going down on is the Union of the United States. He mentions unions in passing, not very complimentary, but it isn't a song about unions per se. I is a mysterious song. It's about a relationship with a mysterious woman, and it's also about God and man. And Don't Fall Apart on Me Tonight, a song that seems to mean a lot to Bob during the recording sessions, though I don't think he's ever played it live, is, again, a very touching and quite amusing song. At one point, he talks about who's that millionaire with the drumstick down his pants. I don't know who he's singing about there. Who can tell? The problem with this album, other than the selection of the songs, I mean, why Blind Willie McTell isn't on and Neighborhood Bully is, why Foot of Pride isn't on, you know, it's just ludicrous. Mark Knopfler had a contract to play some gigs with Dire Straits. This was pre-agreed with Dylan and his management and the record label. They would finish the body of the recording. He would go and play his string of dates. Then he would come back and he would mix and finish the album. He went off to do his gigs. Bob, allegedly, in some accounts, under pressure from Columbia, where's the album, even though they knew the schedule, went back in and mixed it himself with the assistant engineer. Knopfler came back, was appalled, said publicly, it sounds like a rough mix to me, and that's not the right running order for the album I had in mind. Friends of Dylan, to whom he sent acetates and white labels, responded unanimously when they rang him up with their reactions, where the fuck is Blind Willie McTell? And that's a question that will haunt us to the grave. It's not even worth thinking about. The Bob Dylan of 1983, had he been the Bob Dylan who recorded Highway 61 Revisited, would obviously have left like a Rolling Stone off. If the Bob Dylan of 1975 had left Idiot Wind and Tangled Up in Blue off Blood on the Tracks, we think he was insane. But that's what he did, and I'll never understand why. What did you think of this record, Sid?
I hadn't heard this record before, so I came to it with sort of a degree of I try to be open with these things as open as I can. But for me, it's an album. I mean, the only significant feature of this album, it seems to me, is its utter ordinariness. It's musically monosyllabic, which is par for the course for Dylan, and it's the usual, absolute by the numbers kind of songs. And the band, sort of decent enough band, I guess, but they don't really have much to do, and they sort of chug along, and it's the way in which Bob Dylan sort of just, he's this sort of semi-presence on the album. Bob Dylan singing whatever these words are all about doesn't seem to really ever connect much to the music. It doesn't have any. Usually, when I listen to music, what I enjoy about music very often is the way in which the musicians interact and interweave. And it's true. I do mostly listen to jazz rather than as well as some rock, but even on artists who are predominantly singer-songwriters, when I listen to those albums, I always get a sense that there's a reason why that band is there playing with that artist. But with this album, as with other Bob Dylan albums, it's completely there's a sort of a cursory level to it, which I think is astonishing. I mean, obviously it's Bob Dylan, so Bob Dylan can get away with anything he wants to get away with. I have some sympathy with Mark Knopfler, although I have to say, even with what presumably would have been a better mix, I have to say Mark Knopfler would have been struggling, would be my guess, to get anything half decent out of it. The track, I had thought that the track "Don't Fall Apart on Me Tonight" was slightly better than the rest of it, and I'm not sure about that, to be honest. I think I was just sort of a bit desperately trying to find the good in the thing, and I'm not really sure I could really, with hand on heart, really get behind "Don't Fall Apart on Me Tonight." The one bit that I do actually like, without any irony at all, is on the chorus of "Joker Man," which is, as far as I can tell, goes something like "Whoa, whoa," which I think is a lovely hook in an otherwise pretty risible song. So that was it for me. I thought
Joker Man's risible.
Yeah, it's it's kind of just cookie cutter Dylan, really. I mean, yeah, that's the problem with this stuff. It's just kind of stamp it out, it just bangs it out. And there doesn't seem to ever be much kind of thought to it. I mean, obviously, he writes these words, and people like yourself kind of pore over every syllable for meaning and intuit sort of all kinds of great and worthy attributions to it. And it's been like that from day one with Dylan, and will continue to be so long after he's gone. But the thing I keep coming back to is just how extraordinarily dull it all is. I mean, it's Olympic level dullness. That's the thing that hits me more than anything else. But there we are. It's Bob Dylan, so it's going to be dull.
Well, there we go. That's a great one-liner to close on there, Sid. I'd like to say, if anyone out there, after hearing Sid's wonderful words about Infidels, wants to hear any more, there's a great box set.
Of course there is.
I mean, you'd love this, Sid. I might get you this for Christmas. This is 5 CDs. It starts in the Shot of Love period with a couple of discs of outtakes from Shot of Love, but then there's a fantastic sequence of stuff from Infidels, including just about all the missing songs that would have made this a decent record. I actually think, contrary to the flow of this thing, I think Infidels is a good. I first bought Infidels on cassette in the 80s, just soon after it came out. So I've got a soft spot for it. I've known it for a long time. And I do like the songs. I've always liked Joker Man. I've always liked Sweetheart Like You. And I've always liked Union Sundown. I like Man of Peace and I like License to Kill. So I don't think it's anywhere near as dull as Sid says it is. But on this, you can hear all those songs in various stages of development. And you can also hear Blind Willie McTell. Take 5. This box has got take 5. There's another take on a 7-inch single that's not on this box. And there's another take on the original bootleg series 1 to 3, which came out in 91. There's 2 takes of Too Late, the song that became Foot of Pride, and this Foot of Pride itself. So you can actually see a progression through the versions of that song, if, like me, you're interested in that. And there's Julius and Ethel, his cover of Angel Flying Too Close to the Ground, the Willie Nelson song, which he one stage wanted on the record. Someone's Got a Hold of My Heart, which ends up in a different version on Empire Burlesque. A Frank Sinatra song, This Was My Love. Too Late, which is quite a pleasant love song. Clean Cut Kid, which again in a different version ends up on Empire Burlesque. And he even does, and Lord Protect My Child, which is a very moving song from a point of view of a father. He in the outtakes, he does Green Green Grass of Home as well. And it's not like Tom Jones' version. It's like, yeah, this bloke's going to end up being executed. It's never far from your mind in this version. Yeah, so if you want a deep dive into that, and there's a 2-disc version of that as well, with a selection of the best of the outtakes. So I'm sure that'll be on Sid Smith's Christmas list this year.
I'll must remember to nail up my letterbox just in case there's an.
In case Santa tries to deliver it.
Yeah. What's next in this cavalcade of absolute shit show albums?
Yeah, in this cavalcade of misery for Smith. Well, the next album is a live album, Real Live.